Creating a magic system is not easy, but as long as you have the right ideas, the right concepts, you can make anything a reality. With this very fact, I've managed to make my own magic system for the novel I've been writing. So how does my magic system work? Let's start by talking about the energy system. In the world of Solmara, in every atom lies a subatomic particle called a phaeton. Phaetons are a lot more abundant within organic matter, causing sapient beings and plant life to gain magical properties. However, for creatures that aren't sapient, you would find that although there is a very small trace of phaetons, they cannot produce or process mana. So instead, they produce miasma. The concept of miasma is slightly different to mana. You see, miasma bends to the will of a monster, whereas mana bends a person to its own will. Miasma can break reality itself, opening voids to pocket worlds of nothingness, whilst mana, it has restrictions. Within Solmara, there are 4 main elements: fire, wind, water, and nature, all of which have their ups and downs. But there are 2 other elements, 2 elements that, despite existing, are rare to find users for. These 2 elements are light and void. Whilst light magic usually refers to healing magic and holy magic, void is more dark magic and witchcraft, with curses and portals and summoning rituals. So, what are these limitations and restrictions of mana, then? Let's start with the average capacity for phaetons. The average adult capacity for phaetons is 60,000 phaetons within a human body. If a person does not regularly expel the phaetons within their body, they will reach a state called phaeton overload. This is when the amount of phaetons exceeds the capacity of the person's body. What phaeton overload does is destroys a body from inside, causing immense pain and intoxication. So how do people call upon magic? There are 6 varying ways of how they can do so. The first way is by being a wizard and casting the spells, following some sort of incantation or chant. Another way for magic to be used is cultism, where magic circles are drawn and imbued with mana. This launches a large-scale spell with the intention of somehow impacting the world as a whole. Phaetons are used to regenerate a person's soul, and in doing so, allowing them to expel phaetons in a different way. Taming rituals. The way a taming ritual works is by taking a fraction of the person's soul and imbuing it into some sort of creature, allowing that creature to use the same mana and phaetons as the person would be able to. Next we have alchemy, and alchemy's a little bit different. With alchemy, a person has to rearrange the composition of a material. In doing so, it means that they have to change the composition of themselves to allow more phaetons to be released from their own body. So rather than using magic to expel phaetons, they have to edit themselves in a way. They have to open up gateways for phaetons to pass through. Next we have Echarites, whom are simply wizards, but they use light attribute magic. So they're more of a healer class, more more of a holy grade magic user. Finally, the last way to use magic. Witches. They draw their spells prior to battle, prior to combat, infusing their own blood into the ink that they use to draw. The way they expel their phaetons is by imbuing their mana into these seals to activate the spell inscribed on it. However, there aren't just mages in this world. There are other classes. There are warrior classes and archer classes. Yet, they also need to expel their mana, their phaetons. So how do they do this? Well, it's simple. By physically training. Whilst a person's physical strength is not determined by the amount of phaetons they have as a maximum capacity, by staying in shape, they're able to release phaetons without having to cast spells. And even if they didn't stay fit, most warriors and most archers still use some forms of magic, whether it be for defense or offense. Let's speak a little bit more about the creatures of this world. The miasma a monster releases often has an attribute much like mana, but the four main elements signify whether a monster is more or less dangerous, with wind and nature typically being associated with harmless monsters, and fire and water typically being associated with dangerous, deadly monsters. In this world, there are 12,000 species of creatures, and 320 million variations, which are dependent on their environment, what other creatures are around them, which miasma attributes they have. For example, there could be a rodent-type monster that attacks you and has no damage at all because of a weak attribute. But if a rodent-type monster was to have a void attribute miasma, then it would most likely be able to poison you, seeing as that would be the will of the monster. Most monsters, however, aren't able to fully control their miasma, except for one race, the demon bloodline. You see, demons start off as vampires, weak creatures. Vampires are harmed in the sun, only able to use a fraction of their power, and unable to use a miasma during the day. However, they're roughly 3 times as intelligent as the average human. If a vampire survives for long enough, they evolve into an elder vampire. Eventually, if a vampire survives for long enough, they evolve into an elder vampire. Elder vampires aren't as hurt by the sun, but they still have a lot of limitations. They still can't use miasma, and they still have only a fraction of their strength in the sun. However, with this evolution, they become more intelligent and roughly thrice the strength of a human at night time. If they manage to survive, once again, they will evolve from an elder vampire into a demon, once again becoming more intelligent. However, they no longer are harmed by the sun, and whilst they still cannot use miasma, their strength reaches the level of a human during the day. During the night, it reaches a par level with the gods. Once again, if a demon evolves, it will evolve into an elder demon. During the day, a human is a tenth of the elder demon's strength. And during the night, the elder demon has tenfold of the god's power. The next step in this evolution is a primordial demon. They are no longer physically restricted by the sun, and at all times, day and night, they are 20 times the strength of a god. Finally, if they survive for even longer and gain the necessary experience to evolve, then, dependent on gender, they shall evolve into a demon prince or a demon princess. Demon royalty finally unlock the ability to use their miasma during the day, as well as being 100-fold the strength of a god at all times. We have spoken about demons, but what about dragons, the guardians of the world? There are 4 main dragons: wyverns, hydras, leviathans, and drakes, each with a respective attribute. Leviathan, sea beast, attribute of water. Hydra, guardian of flame, attribute of fire. Drake, protector of the plainsland, attribute of nature. And wyvern, wings of freedom, attribute of wind. However, there are 2 more dragons. Holy Dragon, Eastern Dragon of Savior, attribute of light. And the Death Dragon, the Western Dragon of Disaster, attribute of void. These dragons also do have an evolutionary line, however, they only get bigger and stronger, so it is not worth going into. So how does bloodlust work in this world? Well, a person's bloodlust is dependent on their willpower and their willingness to kill. Whilst that can determine how effective the bloodlust is, that is not the only factor. Another factor is anybody's witnessing the bloodlust's mental state. If they have a lower mental state, a lower mental capacity, a weak mind, they are more affected by the bloodlust. Bloodlust is often released during anger or resentment, and it can be suppressed, although difficult. The basic concept of how my magic system and power systems work has been explained within this video. However, there is a more complex side where magic and miasma are taken and combined. I won't get into that here because it is on another level of complexity for a magic system. However, if you want a part 2, if you want to see how miasma and mana work together, then get this video to 100 likes. I hope you enjoy this rant about magic as much as I enjoy talking about it. But until next time, this is farewell.